Norsca were one of the factions basically untouched since their release way back in Warhammer 1. With the launch of Immortal Empires, they've had a small rework to improve their general gameplay and mechanics, with a full rework still promised at a later date. At the moment, they're in a great place, and a powerful monster-focused faction that offers fun, chaotic gameplay without being fully aligned to the Dark Gods. Let's first go over the pros and cons of the Norscan campaign gameplay. First up, the pros. Their tribal confederation allows them to expand at a pretty scary rate, as they can be in control of the entire north in a matter of a very low number of turns. Their research projects earned from owning faction capitals are great, and allow them to have a massive number of buffs onto the faction if they can collect all of these capitals. And finally, your constant sacking and raising of settlements combined with their newly acquired occupation allows them to make fat stacks of cash with ease. As for the cons, of course they are a quote evil faction, so trading with most other factions is going to be a struggle, and you'll probably end up in a lot of wars. Norsca is also no longer the top of the map, and chaos can sometimes come knocking, as well as Kislev and the Empire in the south. This can end up with a very unfortunate enemy sandwich. And finally, the new massive map will take them a long time to get around, so if you want all those monsters and the capital techs, you're going to be in for a very long wait while your armies get across this huge map. Let's now go over the different factions in Norsca. First up, we have the World Walkers, and they are led by Wulfric the Wanderer. Their faction effects: Marauders are granted minus 15% upkeep, and Mammoths gain 15 melee attack. Wulfric's army gains 30% to their reinforcement range, and all units in the army cause fear. Their starting location is the monolith of Bjorkhill Bloodyhand. Their starting units: they gain Marauder Champions, Marauder Berserkers, 2 Great Weapons Marauders, 2 Throwing Axe Marauder Horsemen, and a Feral Mammoth, as well as a Shaman Sorcerer of Metal. Climate preferences are the same for both factions, so we're only going to go over them once. Frozen, Wasteland, Mountain, Chaotic Wasteland, Temperate Island, Savannah and Jungle are suitable, Magical Forest and Desert are unpleasant, and Ocean is uninhabitable. To get the short victory as the World Walkers, you need to reach level 2 of allegiance with any of the Dark Gods and occupy, loot, raise or sack 35 different settlements. When playing as these guys, to get that victory, it's pretty simple. In classic Norsca style, I would unite all the clans using Tribal Confederation, then take the fight to the south, either against the Empire or Kislev, and raise their settlements for the Dark Gods until you reach level 2. If you do this, you should have the required settlements, no problem. The only other faction is Wintertooth, and they are led by Throgg. This faction gains minus 20% upkeep and 15% physical resistance for Norscan trolls and ice trolls. His army grants +1 control locally, all units in the army are immune to attrition, and spread 2 Chaos Undivided Corruption wherever they go. Their faction starts in the Monolith of Flesh, and in the starting army they gain Great Weapons Marauders, regular Marauders, Norscan Ice Wolves, and 2 units of Norscan Ice Trolls, and 2 units of regular Norscan Trolls. And they also gain a Fimir Balefiend of Shadows. To get the short victory as Wintertooth, you need to destroy Cracker Drak, Ropesman Clan, the Ice Court, and the Great Orthodoxy, as well as occupy, loot, raise or sack 35 different settlements. That starting battle will net you an easy couple of settlements, giving you plenty of resources to take the fight straight to Cracker Drak. That'll be a little bit harder to take out, as dwarves can be pretty stubborn, but keep recruiting any armor piercing you can, and you'll get there. Once they're taken care of, you can either confederate the rest of Norsca, or head straight into Kislev to take on your other 3 targets. I'd probably go for Norsca first to get a bunch of land and resources, plus they'll count towards your settlement goal, so by the time you get to Kislev, you'll probably be done. Now come to our faction mechanics. First up, we have Tribal Confederation. Upon beating the leader of another Norscan faction, you are given 3 choices. You can either let them go, which increases relations with the faction, but you're at war with them, so I don't really understand why you would ever want to do this. You can kill the faction leader permanently, which reduces relations, which again seems a bit pointless if you're already at war. Plus, if it's a legendary lord, you will not be able to recruit them if your faction does ever confederate them. Or you can confederate the leader of the faction, which instantly gives you all their settlements and armies no matter what your relations are. This can allow you to take a massive amount of land in a short space of time if you hunt down faction leaders and beat them in battles. If you want to know who you should be going after, just check the diplomacy screen for a name, and then search their lands, and they're bound to turn up somewhere. Next up, we have allegiance to the Dark Gods. When raising settlements, Norscan factions have the choice of dedicating the ruin to one of the 4 gods. Doing so increases favour with the chosen god, and upon reaching 30, 60 and 100 favour, you'll receive bonuses to your faction. Port income and different bonuses will be granted to the faction depending on the god. The Serpent grants buffs to lords and armies, as well as unlocking a unique Chaos Sorcerer, Kehar the Tormentor. The Crow grants buffs to characters and replenishment, as well as unlocking a unique Exalted Great Unclean One, Burple Smirk Spewpit. The Hound grants buffs to units XP and melee infantry, as well as unlocking a unique Exalted Champion of Khorne, Kilgore Slaymame. And finally, the Eagle grants bonuses to research and Winds of Magic charging, as well as unlocking a unique Lord of Change, Azerik the Mazekeeper. Dedicating to one god lowers the dedication of the others, so be careful of spreading the love too much, as you might end up with no one happy. Upon reaching the maximum allegiance with one god, it locks out the other three and rages their champions, spawning in powerful armies to fight you. Each of these are powerful in their own right, so either spread the love a bit to get as many buffs as possible, or focus on one to get those high tier buffs as soon as possible. Now we come to the monster hunts. These are quest chains you unlock via research that allow you to hunt down legendary monsters and face them in battle. Completing these quest chains will net you various rewards such as cash, items, and even some of the monsters to recruit in your own armies. I'd wait until you have a pretty high tier army on the go before attempting them, as they can be pretty tough with all the monsters. Bring plenty of anti-large and ranged, and you'll have a much better time. And their final mechanic is corruption. Like many chaotic factions, Norsca can make use of various types of corruption. The only one they can spread themselves is Undivided, which provides control and attrition for non-chaotic armies. However, they can also make use of the other 4 chaos corruption types and feel the benefit if it just so happens to be there. Khorne gives them buffs to vigor, melee attack and charge bonus, Nurgle gives growth, Slaanesh increases income, and Tzeentch buffs ammo and winds of magic. Now we come to the Lord skills. First up we have Wulfric the Wanderer. We're going to start with Root Marcher, then go into Norse Resilience and Serve or Die for that replenishment and recruitment cost reduction. This spoilers is also good, but you'll mostly be raising, so you won't get much value until you return to it much later. Devourers of Flesh into Lightning Strike and Unnatural Healing, and finally Spawn of Chaos, all of which are no-brainers. Once you can go into his Hunter of Champions tree, you should grab everything there since they are all pretty top tier. Hop into his Dominating Presence tree and buff your endgame units, aka Mammoths, and something else if you like. His Seafang line buffs him as a fighter, and he can be pretty incredibly powerful, especially once he's on that mount, so don't sleep on this line. And finally, grab top row buffs to his Leadership Aura, Weapon Strength, Missile Resist, and Skin Wolves in the army. Next up we have Throgg, and he's going to start the same as Wulfric, so Root Marcher, Norse Resilience and Serve or Die, Devourers of Flesh, Lightning Strike, Unnatural Healing, and finally Spawn of Chaos. Then go into his King of Trolls line for all kinds of buffs to Trolls, Fimir, and Skinwolves in his army, and these are all great units that you should be using, so grab all of these. And then we follow the same as Wulfric again for the most part. Dominating Presence line to buff endgame units, then his Copious Vomit line, which makes him into a more powerful combat lord, which is worth doing since without it, he is a little bit useless. And finally, the top row has buffs to Weapon Strength, Missile Resist, Leadership Auras, and Frostworm units, so are all great. Next up we have Azerik the Maze Keeper. These guys have a slightly different tree to the other 2 legendaries, but the start is still mostly the same. Root Marcher and Norse Resilience, but now grab Takers of All for easy post-battle cash. Lightning Strike, then Unnatural Healing, and Ruination to get the Spawn of Chaos. As soon as you can, you want to head into that spell line and grab everything, since it's a great lore and a caster that can't cast is pretty useless as a lord. Then head into the Dominating Presence line to buff those endgame units, and grab any from the top row for a couple of abilities, Missile Resist and buffs versus Nurgle. Our final legendary is Burple Smirk Spew Pit. He has the same blue line as Azerik, so we're going to start the same here. Root Marcher, Norse Resilience, and now grab Takers of All. Lightning Strike, then Unnatural Healing and Ruination to get to Spawn of Chaos. Grab any spells you want as soon as possible, as spellcasters without spells are pretty pointless, then head into the Dominating Presence line to buff endgame units. His Infernal Champion line makes him into a much better battler, which will be super useful in the Norsca form of combat, so grab this once everything else is taken care of. Finally, the top row has buffs versus Tzeentch and Missile Resist. Now, one and only generic lord type is the Marauder Chieftains. You're going to go for the same stats as the other 2 unlockable lords, Root Marcher, Norse Resilience, and now grab Takers of All. Lightning Strike, then Unnatural Healing and Ruination to get the Spawn of Chaos. Once you can, you want to choose from one of the 4 trees just under the top row. Drinker of Blood is about all-out offense for the Lord themselves, Indulgent in the Exotic makes them more tanky and resolute, Noxious Vessel makes them super tanky, and Spirit Wanderer makes them faster and more defensive. Any of them are a good choice, but for their final form, I personally like Drinker of Blood for the fat attack on a War Mammoth. Then we're going to go into Dominating Presence and buff those endgame units, and close out on the top row with buffs to Weapon Strength and their Leadership Aura. Now comes to the heroes. First up we have Kihar the Tormentor. On the campaign map, he can steal technology, wound heroes, block armies, spread Slaanesh corruption, and provide scouting when embedded in an army. Of course, those spells are priority number 1 to get him more impactful in combat, which is exactly where you want him. Once they're sorted, you can grab one of the options just below the spells, and I love Spellslinger or Alluring Engie for buffs to cooldowns or the whole army. Scouting and spreading corruption are all you need from the bottom row, and then the top row has Missile Resist and Weapon Strength. Our other legendary hero is Kilgore Slaymame. On the campaign map, he can assault garrisons, assassinate enemy heroes, assault units, spread control, and provides training when embedded in an army. I mean, you could use this guy as a campaign assassin, but it would be a massive waste of his talents, so I'd stick to battle. If you're doing this, then grab training for free XP for units in the army, then head into Blade Master to make him into a better battler. Making him super tanky with top tier melee stats is a great way to go, then grab some weapon strength and leadership for good measure. Then you can grab one of the options just below his tree, and I like Command, Strategist or Stalwart, but grab any since they're all fab. And finally, the top row has weapon strength and missile resist. Our first generic lord is the Famir Balefiend. On the campaign map, these guys can damage buildings, wound enemy characters, hinder replenishment, stimulate growth, and replenish troops when embedded in an army. They either come in the Lore of Fire or Lore of Shadows. These guys are great fighters and better casters, so keep them in your armies at all times. Grab their spells first, since it's hard for a spellcaster to cast spells without spells to cast. Evelore is great, so pick your favourites and grab them all. Replenish Troops is a great pick to ensure healthy armies at all times, and the top row has some nice choices for missile resist, melee attack, weapon strength, armor, and spell resistance. And finally, dump anything extra into stimulate growth. Next up, we have the Skin Wolf Werekin. On the campaign map, these can assault garrisons, assassinate enemy characters, assault units, spread control, and provide training when embedded in an army. You can either have these guys as campaign assassins or battle assassins. For the campaign map, you want to grab assassinate and then specialist, and then the rest of the bottom row aside from training, and you're done. For battle, you want to grab training first of all, since free XP is never a bad thing. Then the Dark Horror line has great options for buffing these guys in all kinds of way in combat. Attack, defense, and damage are great choices for their assassination playstyle. You can choose one of the Twisted Flesh or Vicious Assault lines, and I'd go for the latter, as attack is just so strong on these guys. Finally, the top row has missile resistance, weapon strength, and defense, so are all great. Now our final heroes are the Shaman Sorcerers. On the campaign map, they can steal technology, wound enemy characters, block armies, spread undivided corruption, and provide scouting when embedded in an army. You can either grab them in the Lore of Death, Fire, or Metal. These guys are pretty much exclusively spellcasters, since it really is the best use of their talents. Go straight into their spells on your chosen lore, as they are all pretty great. After that, grab scouting for more items and spread corruption to help them get all over the map. Finally, the top row has missile resist, attack, construction cost reductions, and income increases, so they are a bit strange, but decent buffs when you have nowhere else to put points. Now it comes to the commandments. As part of their semi-rework, Norsca can now occupy any settlement on the map, and also have a fresh set of commandments to go along with this. Marauders to Builders grants buffs to growth and construction cost. This is of course great for building up provinces and rushing growth. Summon the Chieftains buffs recruitment cost and capacity, and is of course a great choice when building armies in the province. Raise the Palisades, it reduces siege attrition and debuffs campaign movement range for enemy armies. This makes it a great choice when enemy armies are moving into your lands to invade. And finally, Venerate the Four increases undivided corruption while decreasing all other types. This makes it useful when trying to corrupt a province to get it under control and make it harder for enemies to take from you. And finally, we come to the research tree. The Norsca tree is separated into three main areas. The War Tools line has buffs for Marauder units in the faction, the Monster Hunter line has buffs for monster units as well as unlocking Monster Hunt missions, and finally the Sea Marauders Tools line has a ton of buffs for all kind of things, from unit buffs to infrastructure, as well as buffs to the faction when going against pretty much every other faction in the game. You can also unlock special research projects by owning the capitals of each faction, which provide powerful effects when completed. This encourages you to explore the map and take as many as you can to collect all of these effects. To start off with, it's worth buffing Marauder infantry, since you can make use of them through the whole campaign. After that, I'd head right to the tools line and start buffing infrastructure and be ready to take on any faction you need. Finally, buff monster units once you start recruiting them, and pick up text to help you versus whoever you're fighting. Of course, getting the capital text done whenever possible. That's everything you need to know on how to play Norsca in the campaign. We've got the battle guide coming next Friday to run you through the entire roster as well as compositions and more, so subscribe if you want to see that. We are hoping to hit 50k by the end of the year, so I sure would appreciate the assistance. If you enjoyed this video and or found it useful, then consider dropping it a like. If you're feeling especially big penis and want to support the channel directly, then consider becoming a member on YouTube or a patron on the Patreon. Doing so gets you early insights into future content, increased voting power, and discounts on merch, as well as shoutouts at the end of videos, just like Henry Tucker for his support at the officer's tier. A huge thank you to all supporters of the channel, one last thank you for watching, and for now, I've been Colonel Damneders, and I will see you next turn.